Welcome, Benny, to the Power BI Talks. And thank you for your visit today to talk about Power BI administration. I know that people will have many questions about this. And if you are ready, I can pass the presentation to you.
Yep, I'm ready. So thank you, Cecilia.
Or you can start sharing. Or
yeah, all right, let's get started. So thank you, Cecilia, for having me. I'm even extra honored to be able to kick off the inaugural series on the Power BI Talk series. I love the fact that this is an interactive version. I've kind of grown a bit tired, worn out with the virtual presentations because it's the same thing where I'm just talking to my screen and you're probably just looking at your screen, and it's not the same thing. I thrive on doing those in-person events where I can see people, where I can see what they're doing, where I can have them interact with me as well. So for that exact reason as well, please do ask your questions. If you don't want to come off mute, put them in the chat window. I've got a second screen open. I can watch incoming chat as well. Please do ask your questions. I love to have those questions, and I love to be able to steer this towards the direction that you want to have. I'm going to start this at a very introductory level with the very first steps, and then depending on the input I get from you, we'll ramp it up and we'll see where it takes us. This can go all directions, honestly, and that's the thing that I actually wanted to see. That said, I have two slides. The first one you're already seeing here, which is just the usual title slide. A bit about myself. My name is Benni De Jagere, and I come from Belgium. Belgium is this teeny little country in Western Europe that is mostly known for, I think George said it already as well, for cyclists, for chocolates, for beer, for lace, and having 7 different governments that do the same thing and don't do anything at the same time. That said, we're a small country, but we are in the very center of Europe, which means that it's easy for us to get to places as well. And yes, George, diamonds as well. We have a very large diamonds hub in Antwerp. Myself, I joined the Power BI CAT team, so the customer advisory team, in December 2021. So that means that I'm now 5 months in at Microsoft, and I specifically cover the region for Netherlands, France, Luxembourg, and Belgium, and I help customers. That's the main thing what it boils down to. I either help customers to help them unblock problems that they're facing. I get feedback from them to talk about specific problems, features, challenges that they're having, get feedback from them from what kind of business scenario they're trying to solve, and then funnel that feedback back to the product groups so that we can influence the roadmap and we can influence the priorities to actually get stuff developed for Power BI and for the roadmap as well. And then another large chunk of what I do is produce content and evangelize, spread the word about Power BI. And that's the most fun part about this entire job as well. That said, let me get back to the slides. I also help run this little thing called Data Mines in Belgium. We are the same thing as that we're doing right now. It's a user group, and it tries to bring together people with a passion for data, a passion for sharing knowledge, a passion for learning new things. Due to this pandemic thing, we switched to online as well, and now we're shifted back to online and in person. So we're not doing hybrid because it's just not the same. So we do one hybrid. We do one online activity and one in-person activity. And as I said, it's getting people together, talk about data and AI, talk about Microsoft Data Platform, and just help everyone learn and grow new things. If you want to find me on any of the social channels, I'm pretty easy to find on most of them. So I usually always go by the same handle, which makes it easier for you to find me. Same thing on GitHub. I do have a few things on there. There are more things that I need to get on there, but I'm still working my way on getting them in a publishable state. That said, the slides that I usually have for a Power BI administration talk are also on there, and I'll share the link with you as we go along. And then, quick spoiler, I'm not a very big fan of pie charts. I'll be honest, I think pie charts are overly used. They're not always used in the right terms. And I'm not against pie charts. I just want them to be used correctly and for the right reasons. That's the entire thing, what I want to do with this. So let's get cracking. Let me get the correct browser window up. So what I'm doing today is I am stepping into the footsteps of a Power BI tenant admin, a new Power BI tenant admin. That can be either with starting up a new tenant, which doesn't happen that much, or that can be with grandfathering an existing tenant where you need to make sure that you can get to those sort of steps. So usually that means that we end up in the home screen. What I have to say about this is that I have a developer tenant that I've set up. This means that it's a free tenant that anyone can go to. You can set up a personal tenant for yourself if you Bing or Google, whatever your search engine of preference is. If you look for 365 developer tenant, my laptop usually blows up when I'm doing stuff with Teams. So if you Bing for developer tenant, that means that you can set up your own tenant. You can get free Office 365 E5 licenses for 90 days. And that means that you have your personal playground to do whatever you want to do with it. That means that you can do anything you want to do with this, and that you can have your own tenant admin where you can play around with things. You can set up your own workspaces. You can set up different user profiles to test security stuff, etc. And it's really useful. Because for instance, for my personal use case, I want to present stuff. I want to present things about doing a Power BI tenant, but I can't show the internal Power BI tenant of Microsoft because that is one, it's the biggest piece of rubbish as for management and administration that you've seen. As we have the saying here in Belgium, a good plumber doesn't have a working toilet in its own home because he's always outside to fix other people's toilets. It's the same thing. We're always busy working on stuff for other people, and our own tenant is a bit of a mess, to be honest. So that also means that you have your own personal tenant. You can set up things and you have all the keys to everything. It means that you have the global admin privileges to the entire tenant. That makes it so easy to figure out things on your own. Because in most organizations, I mean, I've been a consultant before as well. In most organizations and customers I go to, when I say, hey, can you please give me the Power BI admin role? They say, no, go away. You're not getting it. Or can I please have Office 365 privileges? They say the same thing. No, you're not getting it. And it means that you usually always have to do some debating, send them cookies, send them gift baskets, whatever, to try and get them to give those permissions to you. And for that reason, it's just simple to get your own tenant, so you can set up things that you can have the working scenario and say, okay, this is what we need to do, and this is how we're going to do it. And this is what I actually need for this. It means that when you have that tenant, it means that you have a number of accounts, a number of users that get created for you. They just give out standard users that you can go to. They give these predefined users. Those are all mostly predefined users for SharePoint stuff, for Office related stuff. So what I usually do is I create a bunch of new users. So I have one admin user. That's the thing. I have one admin user. And then because of the fact that I want to use premium per user or pro features at some times, that has a limited set of the trial experience. I'm lazy and I create new accounts every 4 months that I can keep reusing for the things. Then in the background, it means that you set up, Louis, I will get to your question. It means that I set up groups as well, and I have those groups give out access to everything that I need to do, and then it's just creating a new user and give them access to those groups. Okay, Louis, you have a question. Go ahead.
Yeah. I want to know, because you mentioned right here premium per user, and then you also share with us the developer program that we can get our tenant. And I would like to know if we can get, for example, right now I'm using to get premium features available in my tenant at the organization. I'm using premium per user license. I do not have a capacity, but I would like to test like some behaviors, so kind of stuff, to tell the company if they should buy the capacity, right? Because they're asking me, how we're going to spend that much money if we don't know how it's going to be, right?
Yeah.
So basically, I want to know if we can get like a 10 or something in this developer program, if you know, or was any way that we can test like the behavior.
It depends a bit on what you want to test. So everything for features and is this premium feature the one that we want to use? Premium per user is perfectly fine for testing all these things. If you want to look at it from a capacity perspective, from how do we manage that capacity, how do we do these things, there's a few options. One option is if you have your local specialist, your local Microsoft account team, ask them if you can get a sponsored trial. Sometimes they give them out, sometimes they don't. It means that you get a 1 month free trial experience to your premium capacity. They hook it up to your tenant ID, and then that means that you get 1 month of free usage. The other option, the easier option without having to deal with all the administration and all the back office work, is looking at a Power BI embedded or an A SKU. And that means that you can use that Power BI embedded SKU as well to test those trial features, to test those premium capacity features as well. The only thing that I have to say about this is that the A SKU is allowed to test things for Power BI for development, test, and acceptance purposes. So you cannot use the A SKU for production purposes, because then if you want to do it for production purposes, it needs to be either a premium, a P SKU, or those premium per user capacities, or those things. And that you can set up yourself. It means if you bing for Power BI embedded A SKU, you set it up through an Azure portal, you get billed by the minute for what you're actually doing with this. You can scale it up, you can scale it down, and that allows you to do those testings yourself. You can hook it up to the developer tenant that you have, because you also get $125. No, I get 125 euros. That means you get $150 worth of free money to play around with. So that developer tenant that you have free money to test things for you.
Okay, yes, and it's bringing me another question, which is normally I have tested a capacity before in the past in other companies, but I haven't get in touch with how to metrics a capacity, right? I know this one they're gonna be embedded is gonna be different. I know there is that one app that we can get from the Microsoft, which is the capacity metrics app. But normally when I try to read those kind of metrics, it's kind of hard, right? For example, over here they are referring to Balkan core, and normally when you are reading the metric report is referring to key PU. So basically there's gonna be like kind of difference where I don't have like, I don't know like normally how to read those metrics or get the correct information or insights. And I have read the documentation from Microsoft, and yeah, I wonder if you have, I don't know, any tip or any advice or any way to get that information.
Yeah, so not something that we can dive into in under a minute right now. The gist of it is that I try to get a hold of how much usage you expect it to be, and then you can use those A SKUs, those embedded SKUs. You can also hook up your embedded capacity. You can also use the capacity metrics app for this as well. So you can do the same thing. But if you're talking about which size do I pick, that's something that's yeah, it's a longer discussion and maybe something that we don't want to tackle right now.
Okay, no, sure. Yeah, thank you very much for your answer.
Okay, thank you for the question. So if I jump back to what I was doing, it means that I set up those different accounts. So I have the admin account that just does everything for me, where I can jump from point A to B and have everything going. Over time, I think I still have 3 days left on the premium per user license. Over time, that means that this account will no longer have any paid license covered and attached to it, which means that I'll have to do everything with those other users as well. So that's the first thing that I do with this. Then the second thing is I want to make sure that I have groups assigned. And groups is the way that I can easily hook a set of users into each other, that I can group them together, and that I can use those groups to actually go ahead and use them for all kinds of purposes within Power BI. Because as a general piece of advice, it is a lot easier to manage all your aspects of Power BI with groups rather than individual users. Even in the tenant administration part, where I'm going to after this, you only have groups as your option to do these things. I'm sorry, Neela, but I'm gonna try and mute you. So it means that you only get to use groups for that specific part. But then if you're managing everything for workspaces, you can do it with users specifically as well. But in the end, if it's 2, 3, 4, 5 users, that's easily doable. But if you're talking about an audience of 200 people need access to this workspace, then it gets a bit easier of doing this with groups as well. So the same thing is I have my tenant at my disposal as well, and I go to something called Azure Active Directory, which does everything for us. For managing authentication, managing the fact that we can assign privileges to things, etc. as well. And there's two things that I want to do here. So the first thing being, I want to make sure that I have at least a group available at my disposal, or multiple groups that I can use for this as well. So right now I only have 2 groups available for workspaces and for a service principal. And that means that as soon as I have this workspace, as soon as I have this group, I can go and ahead and see who's a member of this group and who's an owner of this group. I can add people to this. And it means that as soon as I reference this group inside of Power BI, that all the people, all the groups, all the service principals included in this specific group will be used as well. That's the beauty of this thing. What I also need to tell is that I should do it with a proper group as well to follow some best practices, but I was a bit lazy when I was doing this, is that I have, for the service principal group, I did assign them to have Power BI and Power Platform administrator privileges. That's the beauty of having those key to the kingdom. I can assign any types of privileges, any types of roles, assignments, what I want to do with this as well. A question from Gina. This group management / Azure AD management is all part of the developer program subscription. Yes, it is, because I am logged in under my admin user for that particular developer tenant, and it just comes with a basic Azure Active Directory subscription as well. So you have the entire similar environment as well that you probably have in your own organization or with your customers, and it just makes it a bit easier to dig into these things as well. So that said, I mean, I highly encourage you to set this up, because it makes it really easy for you to learn these things as well. That's how I originally got started a couple of years back as well in my journey within tenant administration. So I've got users set up, I've got users set up, I have got groups set up. The one thing you need to know is that all of these users have an E5 developer license. So E5 means that they inherently also get a Power BI Pro subscription, so that I have all those Pro features at my disposal. And I can, for every new user that I have, for every user that has not yet selected the trial experience, I can also get premium per user for those users as well. Then I'm jumping into Power BI. 2 things that I want you to do if it's a new tenant or if it's a tenant that you're taking over for someone else. First thing is go into the help and support section and go into, go into About Power BI. Why am I saying this? I want you to check this setting. I want you to check where your data is stored. Why is this an important thing? Azure has different regions. Azure has different data centers where data is located for Power BI and for all of the Azure services as well. So right now, my data is stored in the Netherlands, which is the closest data center to myself. But let's say if it were, for instance, in one of the US Midwest data centers, that would mean that everything that I do, or everything that my users here in Belgium do, that would mean that the data gets sent, the requests get sent over to the US Midwest, the data needs to be sent back, and then it just means that you'll have a small delay. It won't be that big of a delay, but it's something that can be at play. If you have a global company, there are things that you can do to help soothe this problem as well. Louis, you have a question? Go ahead.
Oh, yeah. Regardless of this direction that you mentioned, normally when I have an error in Power BI, the error give me this request ID, dependent of when I contact the support team at Microsoft, they told me that they need the request ID to consult in custom table that is going to display the information regardless of my tenant. So they ask me normally this kind of where is my tenant located, so they can go and choose the correct cluster from the custom table, right? But normally, for example, myself, when I have an error, I don't know. I do not have the way to, I get the request ID and check it in Custom table. I don't know if that's possible, getting this information, or is any,
No.
I mean, Gusto is going to be only for Microsoft employees.
Yes,
Okay.
that's where we store anonymized telemetry data for tenants. So that's not something we give out publicly.
Okay, sure. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, no worries, no worries. A question from Bagyashri. Sorry if I butchered your name. Can we call this Azure Active Directory group in the Power BI app to give access to a particular group? Yes, and I will demonstrate that in a short bit as well. That is entire point of working with these groups and making sure that it makes your life as an admin or as workspace admins easier as well. But I am well aware that not everyone has free access to groups and assigning members to groups. That's a common theme that I hear when working with customers as well. There we go. So the first thing that I wanted you to check is, where is that data stored? That's the thing, because it means that you need to be aware of where your home tenant is, because that is something that is important for a few next steps as well. Let's say that, for instance, you have other Azure data services going, you have Azure SQL databases, you've got maybe Synapse, you've got maybe Data Factory, other Azure services that run. If you have your home tenant in the Netherlands and then your data services, your data lake, your database is running in the US Midwest, that also means that that data needs to be sent over the lines. And it means that it can potentially take a bit longer, but there is also a very small cost that gets applied to this when data needs to be sent out of a data center to another data center. And that is something that we call egress charges. And I mean, we're not talking about dollars and dollars of spend. We're talking about a very small percentage of dollar cents. But it is still a charge that gets applied if you're sending larger volumes over different data centers. And again, in those larger multinational companies, you probably want to have this because we want to have data as close to the people as possible. But if it's a smaller company, 50 people, 100 people, and you're in Florida, it doesn't make sense to have that data center located in Sydney, for instance. So that's something to really look at closely. And then the question that I usually get is, okay, well, I've verified where my tenant is and my company is in Florida, but my tenant is in Sydney. So now what I would do? The short answer is you can't do it yourself. It means that you have to file a support ticket, and then you can say, hey, support, I want to have my tenant moved from one area to the other area as well. They can do that for you. They can't move every exact piece as is, but we're radically improving this process as well. So you can actually move that tenant as well, but it's only a full-on 100% move. You can't say, I want to get 2 tenants and I want to take these 3 artifacts and those 4 artifacts and then move them together. That's something that you'll have to do yourself then as well. There we go. So the second thing that I wanted you to do is, when I go into the admin portal and then I go into the settings here, the admin portal, I want you to double check, triple check, quadruple check, and then let's keep it moving. If you are collecting, if you're collecting audit logs. Why am I saying collecting audit logs? Why am I saying this? It means that it logs every action, well, not every, a lot of the actions that are being taken in your Power BI tenant. Is someone bringing a report? Is someone updating or updating stuff from the gateway? Is someone publishing new reports? Is someone publishing stuff into their own My Workspace environment? And are they sharing this to the entire company? Or are people doing publish to web stuff? That's the types of things that comes up with this. So if it is a tenant that you're taking over, or if it is a new tenant, you can go up to the Microsoft 365 Admin Center and then make sure that you have the audit logging enabled. Usually it will be enabled, but I have seen some occasions where it's not being activated. And as I probably will mention like 75, if not more times throughout this talk, the audit logs, the activity log, is a treasure trove. You can get so much useful information from this that it will really help you get these things out of there. So you'll see this big blue button. For some reason, it keeps appearing on my developer tenant. I'm not completely sure why, but I also didn't want to check into this. But as soon as you have this, it means that you can go ahead and look into what actions have been taken, what stuff has been doing. The thing is, I also see a question from Nilam. What's the benefit of moving the tenant location? As Gina mentioned as well, it is mostly about geographical location and having the data close to you. It also means, for instance, if you have a company that's moving from Florida to Seattle, it also makes sense that you move that data closer to you as well. You want to have it as close to you as well to reduce latency in any of the types of requests that you're doing. I mean, are there any other downsides of the latency and in the minor egress charges that get added to it? No, but in some cases, for instance, particularly when I talk to German clients of mine over here in Europe, it is a big deal because German customers usually have a requirement that data is not allowed to exit the country. The data physically needs to stay in Germany. So that is a very big deal for their specific cases. And there are other scenarios as well where it makes a very big deal. But other than for reasons that I can imagine for private American organizations, it just means that it's about proximity. That's the whole thing. So the activity log, like I said, gives you the overview of who's done what. And then it gives you also the insight. Let's say that you're 3 months, 4 months down the road. It gives you the insights on, okay, well, I've built this super duper critical report that the finance people needed to have done yesterday. I threw away my entire schedule to build this thing. And then 3 months later, you go ahead and check it again and see, well, okay, that super critical report has been looked at once by me. What's the deal with this? It helps you determine if those reports actually get used, and it helps you determine if someone is doing some things that you may not actually want to have in your tenant. And that is something that's really, really useful for you as well. So how do you get that data? The easiest option is that if you have it enabled, you can look at this, you can search for specific activities, search for specific things that you want to do, and then just look for it. You get a table. You get a table of data back. You can export it to a CSV file. And that's the easiest way of digging into this. The proper way of doing this is by setting up some form of automation. Power Automate, PowerShell, Azure Functions, whatever is something that you have at your disposal and that you're good at. And then you can call out an API on the Power BI side and get that data programmatically out there as well. So it is actually one of the few things that I have on my GitHub page as well. But it's the same thing if you Bing Google for Power BI activity log extract, you'll find many of the different solutions that are actually really useful for you to help. Lewis, is there any way to track the latency between the gateway and the Power BI service? Yes, but not something that I can easily explain in under a minute here. So it may not be a proper thing to dig into right now as well. Fabio, is this the same source for the usage metrics reports in PowerBI.com? Yes and no. It uses some of the same thing. I give horrible answers sometimes, I know. It leverages the same type of data underneath. The difference is that the usage metrics, what I'm looking at now, is it's an uncustomizable page. You can't do that much with this. You can click on a few things. That's pretty much it. The whole point of the activity log is that you get the raw data and that you can actually do anything with it yourself. That means that you can build out your own reports. That means that you can send it into a database, into a data lake, into an Access file, for all I care. You have the freedom to do with it whatever you want to do with it. This is useful to have a quick overview, to have a quick glance at what is happening, but it's not what you want to manage a larger tenant, because right now it's just me, myself, and I doing 3 clicks a day or something. But if you have a larger organization, 50, 100, or even more people, the usage of this decreases rapidly going forward with this one as well.
Sorry, can I expand on the question just a little bit?
Sure.
So we do have the Power BI audit logs through PowerShell script, and it's automated. Numbers sometimes I see add up kind of nice, and sometimes I see discrepancies. That could be small, and then from time to time I see like a very large one, which I would assume there's something wrong. But is it okay if I see discrepancies? Because I have some like users that use this usage metrics reports, and having different numbers is something usually you don't want to present, because once I present my data and it's like, no, but this is coming directly out of powerbi.com.
Yeah, so the thing as well is this one particular is you can't customize this. And then the same thing is if we go into one of the workspaces, where have I actually done something? And if I go ahead and say that I want to get where did they move it? If I get because I assume that this is the one that they're using, the view usage metrics report. Yeah.
And with the audit logs, maybe I'll see like, hey, I have 3 more users here. There are 3 views less here.
Yeah.
And is that okay? Or is that something that you tell me like, hey, you're doing something wrong because this one says 52 views and the report you're building off the audit log says 49? Is it the same sources and I have to go back, maybe I'm doing wrong, or this could actually happen because they're not exactly using the same source?
So the textbook answer is they should be the same. They are the same source.
They should be the same.
The practical answer is what are they filtering on? What is this filtering on? Which specific days are you looking at? Which actions are you looking at? They should be the same, but it's always going to be a matter of what data has been filtered down to this.
Okay. Thanks.
Thank you. Kiati, does it show inactive reports and inactive users on the usage metrics page? I honestly don't know. It's been a very long time since I looked at this. My gut feeling tells me no, because it's something that I always had to figure out myself with those activity log statements as well. Nope, I don't think so. Nope, it doesn't appear on this. It doesn't appear on this space as well. So usually, what the strategy is to determine this is that you extract that activity log as soon as possible. It means that as soon as you go away, or if your lunch break ends, or if you do it tomorrow, double check if you're capturing that data, because that data only exists for the public endpoints for a limited number of time. The activity log, the API that I refer to, is 30 days. So you can get 30 days of history back through that mechanism. So the longer you wait, the more data you will be missing out on. Capture the data, store it somewhere. Like I said, database, data lake, Synapse, access file, whatever. Store it somewhere. And that means that you have the reference of what has been who's been doing what. And then it's the case of having the reports. Yes, Fernando, Excel, even if you want to, but keep in mind the 1,042,000 record limits that you may bump into. It means that you look at the reports that you have, the workspaces, the data sets that you have. You get those on the one side, and on the other side, you get the activity log. And then it's a matter of referencing the reports, and do they exist in the other activity log parts as well? Do they exist, and do they actually appear in the activity log? If they're not appearing, that means that those reports are not or underused. That's the whole thing. And it means that you need to get the information about those reports and workspaces as well. And you have to do that through API calls. But I will also give you a link a bit later into the talk as well, on how you can have a really useful set of tools and scripts defined by one of my colleagues on the CAT team that can help you get started with this really easily. But it's something you have to do yourself. JC, what method do I recommend for storing the API results? I suck the least at PowerShell, so I tend to stick with PowerShell. And then I am a BI person from on-prem times, so I typically go back to a SQL database because that's what I know. That's what my skill set is. I know that I should be doing all the trendy stuff and putting it in a data lake, but I still go back to a database because that's what I know and that's what I can easily do. It boils down to what's the skill set that you have for yourself, in your team, what do you want to do? That's the main driver for me. Do you have to do this with all those super fancy, shiny Synapse stuff? No, because if it means that it'll take you 2-3 weeks longer to start storing that data, then it's defeating the purpose. That's the whole thing. Myself, like I said, PowerShell and then dump it into SQL. That's what works best for me. Okay, then tenant settings. This is the centerpiece of everything you are doing as a tenant admin. So again, if you're setting up a new tenant and if you're setting up, if you're grandfathering an existing tenant, a few things that I want you to check first before you go into these things. Number one is create workspaces. This setting is enabled by default on new tenants. It means that every user that has a Power BI subscription, a free, a pro, doesn't matter, every user can create a new workspace for themselves. It's something you have to debate in the organization if this is what you want, if this is not what you want. But typically, I see some form of no, not everyone can actually create a workspace. Only a fixed number of people can do this, and then everyone else has to log a ticket in ServiceNow, Topdesk, Jira, whatever service management tool that you have in the organization. What I want to emphasize is that it's not just if you're locking down these tenant settings. It's a recurring theme for myself as well. Is if you're locking down things, you have to make sure that you make it easy for people to request it, so that they can actually get things done as well. Because if you lock down the workspaces and they have to wait for 12 business days to get a workspace created, they'll do things other ways. They'll go to My Workspace, they'll go back to Excel files, to Access files, to Lotus Notes. They'll go back through those things because they can get their job done there. It means that if we're locking down things, we need to make sure that it's easy for them to use as well. And that's the key thing to everything with tenant administration. And then I see Fernando also shared a reference to Melissa Coates's data strategy. Melissa indeed has she has the reference material for everything regarding to Power BI tenant administration. So the workspace planning segment as well is a very good article, which is good to read for yourself. But what it means right now is that everyone can create these workspaces. It means that I now have a few options. I can enable this or I can disable this. And if I disable this, it just means that no one except for Power BI admins can create workspaces, which also isn't what I want to be seeing either. I want to make sure that it's enabled and that I can have specific people that can do this. And this is where those security groups that I refer to come into play as well. So if I go ahead and say that I want to look at my security groups that I defined earlier, for instance, the workspace ones, this is always beautiful when Teams is running. So if I go ahead and apply this, this means that within my tenant, no one can create workspaces except these people. Well, except these people. But you can flip it around as well. If you say except, if you say that it's except specific security groups, it means that everyone can create workspaces except for these people in these groups, in this particular group. It's depending on the behavior that we want to have. Usually I see people going for the exception rules where it's disabled for where only this specific set of people can do it, and not the where everyone can do it except these people. It's usually the first way where people are just in the, okay, these groups, people can create these workspaces. That's the strategy that I see most often. So this means that now within this set, only those people can go ahead and create workspaces. That's the first tenant setting that I want you to look at. The second tenant setting is my personal enemy, because I've seen some really shady things happening with this in the past, is that I want you to look at publish to web. Publish to web by default only allows for the existing codes that you have. Double check if this is the case for your organization or not. What do I mean with publish to web? It is that you anonymously make a Power BI report available on the public internet. it's on the public internet. That means that the report is available for anyone to access this that has the link to it. But it also means that if you're a bit handy with a search engine, you can also scrape the internet for those published to web reports. And then if you have those reports, if you're a bit useful and handy and tricky with your fingers, you can also get more compromising details from those published to web reports. So am I saying that you shouldn't use this feature never, ever, ever, ever? No, I think publish to web is a great feature if you want to publish something like a map for your nonprofit scenario or data that is intended for public use anyway. But if it's public data, if it's private data regarding HR data for your company, it may not be the right way to do this just because it's free and you can publish it and you can embed it into your SharePoint portal or whatever. Because I can find these things by referencing a couple of keywords on Google fairly easily. It means that you don't want that data to be on the public internet. And right now, I mean, we're a couple of years down the road. More people are aware of that it's not that good of an idea. But when the feature initially came out, you wouldn't believe the things I found on Google for publish to web. I found HR records, I found wages, I found stock details, all in publish to web. I found them. I even found contact details for a number of companies as well. So I pinged that back to those companies and said, you may want to shut this down because this is not good. It's a great and excellent feature, but please only use it for data that is intended for public use anyway. That's the whole gist of it. If you want to embed things or if you want to share things with other people, you want to make sure that it's a bit more locked down. And Fabio, does this affect embedding in organization SharePoint sites? This tenant setting does not affect that because the embedding into SharePoint sites is something that we do with secure embed. If you go into your report, that means that you'll have the option to say secure embed. That's going to give you links. And if you embed that into SharePoint, you still need to authenticate yourself. You still need to log in SharePoint and Power BI to be able to view that report. What it is with publish to web, go into the embed code section. It means that I have one report on the public web as well. I can get this URL, and if I open up an anonymous browser window, I can get the same URL and I can view it. It doesn't require you to authenticate. It doesn't require you to do any type of identification. If you have the link, you can access this. That's the whole point of publish to web. It's meant for public websites and embedding it into these things. There we go. Raphael, are we able to use activity logs to identify which reports are being shared publicly? Yes, the activity log will show a reference that published to web. It's published to web that you'll see. It will show a reference that you have there. The easier way is what I'm showing here is by going into the admin portal, by going into embed codes, and then you get the list of all the published to web reports you have. That's the easier way of finding out which of these have been used. Yeah, that's the exact one that I meant, George. So embed report, and then if you select SharePoint Online or website or portal, it's going to give you that secure embed. And then the third option, publish to web, is only what you can do if the tenant setting allows you to do it. Wilson also has a question. Is there IP translation by a firewall, proxy, or security device for intranet to use internally? Whew. Okay, so for publish to web, there's no such thing. It doesn't do any of the security, or it doesn't apply any form of security. For secure embed, I hate to say it, but it depends. It depends on how your own organization has set up the usage of SharePoint or the customer portal, etc. as well. It depends on how they are set up. I think technically it is possible, but it's not something that I have at the top of my head right now. Okay, so going back, workspaces is one. Publish to web is no, Gina. I said it depends before. It's impossible. It's impossible. So going back, there are a few other things that I want you to be aware of, and that's the last few things that I want to ramble on about, because I also want you to have time for your question in the discussion. The most important things is that everything in the export and sharing settings is what I want you to look at to be able to tell how people can export or share data from your data sets, from your reports. So the common discussions, the common conversations that I've had with customers and with people is about export to Excel and export to CSV. It means that if they interact on one of the visuals inside of Power BI, they can export that data, either the summarized data or the underlying data, to an Excel file. What are reasons that you may not want to have this? Is that, well, as soon as they export this data and they land it into a new CSV file or an Excel file, it's out of your control. If you have security applied on it, it's out of your control. You have no more to say about this. So typically, I tend to say go for analyze in Excel using the pivot tables and connect it to a data set where that data security is still applied to these things as well. That's typically what I try to steer to, because it just allows you to have a bit more control. Do you have to do that for all the data? I mean, no. If it's for public data anyway, it doesn't matter that much. But if it's for that private, sensitive HR data of your company, then I typically want to have that a bit more locked down as well. And then the same thing is for, do you want people to be able to export reports to Word document, Excel files, as images, all those things? You can all influence that behavior, the same thing as well. It means that by default, these will be enabled, and then you can say, okay, I want only this group to be able to do this, or no one can do this except these people in these groups. That's something that I really want you to look at as well, because it is, you'd be surprised of how inventive people can sometimes get to extract data for their own personal needs. That's the thing. And Harish, publish to web, does indeed not have an option to download the data. This is by design. this is by design. Yes. Then one of my pet peeves as well as an admin, for end users, this is a fantastic things, but allow shareable links to grant access to everyone in your organization. It means that it is the Office 365 equivalent of everyone with this link can view what you have, which is a good thing. I mean, if it's the data that's meant for public use anyway, and everyone of your organization needs to be able to access this anyway, it's a really useful thing. But do you really want your HR data to be accessible by anyone that has the link? I myself, as the admin, I get anxious about this, because when data leakage occurs, they're usually going to point at the admins first, and not the end users. It's only when the admins found out who the end user is that they need to point to when the finger pointing gets shifted. But admins are usually going to get the blame first, which is something that myself, I want to make sure that, one, I want to have it scoped so that I only a number of people that are able to do this, and that we've explained the what, how, why, and when, and won't, and when do you do this and when do you not do this. That's actually the case of this entire thing. So Shah, shareable links from apps or workspaces, it is for reports only at this point, I think. Yeah, it's for reports only at this point. So it's when you go into a report, yep, this one, Fabio, a row level security and object level security supersede this. Yes, they will still be applied to this. It's just for viewing the report. But if you have row level security and object level security layered on top of this, then no, they will not be able to do this. So if I go into my report, it means that I can share. Yep, there we go. And this is the context menu that we have from within Office 365 as well. And I can go ahead and say, okay, I want to share this. I want to give them build permissions, etc. And then everyone with this link can view my report and can reshare my report. It's super easy because my report can instantly get shared with the entire organization and people can reshare this as well. But That's the thing. Do you want this to be the default behavior, or do you want this to be a bit more locked down that not everyone can do this? So it's something for you as an admin to consider and to make sure that you will at least have thought about what this can do and where you need to make some changes potentially. Lots of different settings in here for how people can share these, how people can export data, etc. There are a few more things that I want to highlight as well. Then one of the things that's often forgotten is everything about Power BI visuals. So natively within Power BI, you have visuals. I mean, you have the standard visuals. You've got your bar charts, column charts, pie charts, the Azure maps, those things. But I mean, there are reasons why you want to look beyond this and why you want to look at custom visuals. So visuals that do some more advanced types of visualizations, or we all want the aquarium visual in all of our reports. I understand the sentiment. We all want to have this thing. So by default, it means that in any organization, custom visuals are allowed. And like I said, that's a good thing. What this setting means is that everyone can go into the app source and collect a custom visual, and everyone can upload their own .pbi viz file. So that means that they can upload their own custom visual to Power BI Desktop and upload that report as well. By default, it means that everyone can do it. Do you need to lock it down? Look at your personal situation in the organization or with your customer and determine if it's a good thing or not. Typically, I say that only a limited set of the report creators can do this, and that they are the ones that can upload those reports with the custom visuals as well. And then the next step within this is, well, what types of custom visuals do you allow in the organization? So if you go into the app source, there is something called certification. And it just means is it blue or is it green these days? I forget. A little checkbox next to those visuals. And it means that they are certified, that they went through a rigorous process of getting tested. They did code scans, they did code reviews, they did interviews. They went through a long process to get their stuff certified. In larger organizations, especially in the financial sector, the Big Four, healthcare data, we typically only say that certified visuals are allowed. Why? Because they have been vetted, they have been approved. Does that mean that uncertified visuals are unsafe? No, it just means that they went through less level of scanning and checking and auditing. That just means that they went through less parts. And why is this entire thing relevant? Why is this the point that I bring up? It means that, for instance, maps are a very, very common theme with this. It means that whenever you use a map visual, the map visual underneath is going to make external calls to the mapping service, to Bing, to Google, to TomTom, whatever. It's going to make external calls. So your data that's being used, those data points are being sent outside of your tenant, outside of Power BI. And not everyone wants this. If it's just a geolocation of whatever country, but if it's the U.S. military army base secret locations, they probably don't want to send this to public endpoints on the internet. That's the whole thing. The data gets sent externally, and that's something you need to be aware of. Does that mean that those certified visuals don't make external calls? It just means that they went through more rigorous scanning as well. That's the whole thing. So the same thing happens where you can say, okay, I want to make sure that it's visuals only. That's the whole thing. And scope it like however you want to do this. As soon as you set the setting, it does mean that you can add exceptions. If you go into the organizational visuals tab, that means that you can add exceptions here. You can either upload manually the PBI viz file, or you can get the app source location. If you go into app source, you can select any of the visuals that you want. There we go. Then you can add that, and that means that it's not a certified visual, but it will still be allowed for usage within your organization. So yeah, I'm just going to skip this because it's taking too long. That means that you can use this as well, which is a really useful thing. And then one of the last things that I want to mention to you, this is some part of the setups that you'll probably have to do to get all of the data out, to get that activity log, to get those reports, to get all of these different things. It means that you want to look at a few of these settings as well. So by default, on the Power BI side, the audit logs will get Power BI tenant is set up for the audit logs to be collected, which is a very good thing. And then this is where we're getting at as well. So everything with a service principal is typically how you want to be using these things. You can do it yourself as well with your own user account, but at the end of the day, you want this to be able to be done unattended with an automated, let's call it managed identity. And that's where you use this service principal to get to these things. That's the part where it gets a bit more tricky, but I am going to share you a few links as well that can easily help you to look at these things. I see a few questions. Okay, so Gina mentioned Charticulator. Charticulator did recently get certified, which is a very good thing because it allows you to have a certified visual to essentially mean create your own visuals in a fairly easy way. I'm not saying it's 3 clicks and you're done, but it allows you to have lots of flexibility as well. Then we've got Chewy. By the way, Chewy, congratulations on joining the dark side. I'm very happy to see you here. Chewy joined the Microsoft team as well in the Bing space. Is there a way to keep some governance when enabling allow visuals created using the Power BI SDK, specifically for visuals that are not listed in the organizational visuals? No, there's no clear answer for this. It's something that I get back a lot from the bigger customers as well. It's something that I keep beating the drum on with the product team as well to make sure that we can get this included, because there's no easy way that you can say, I've got these 3 custom visuals that are used in these 17 reports within the organization. There's no easy way. I'm aware of this and other people are aware of this as well. Harish, can we turn off the capability to use uncertified visuals? That's the tenant setting that I mentioned with only allow certified visuals. Here, that's the one. If you enable the setting, if you set this to enabled, yeah, maybe it helps if I only click once. If you set it to enabled, that means that no one can use those uncertified visuals. As soon as you apply this, that means that it's set to this. Go ahead. I don't have the share open on the reports when I access them from apps. So Shada probably means that the tenant admin in your organization disabled those shareable links. That's probably why you're seeing this. There we go. There we go. Okay, so that's all the questions we have. A few things that I want you to take away from this. I want you to make sure that you're aware of where the tenant is. That's the key thing that I want you to check. Then go into this tenant setting and make sure that you check all of the settings and that you have an explanation of why they're set to a specific reason, to a specific way of configuration. The second step on this entire tenant setting thing is to make sure that if you're changing settings, that you're documenting this, why you're changing this. For instance, publish to web. If you're disabling this, just document it and say that weird Belgian guy said that it's not a good idea to do this. That you have a reason why the tenant setting is changed from the default behavior, because you will know that now. But if in 6 months, 7 months, you get a new colleague in the team, or you need to look back on this, you will not know why you've set the setting that way. Trust me, you won't. I struggle to know what I've done yesterday these days anyway. So it means that you have to get this information, you have to store it somewhere else. At this point, you cannot extract the tenant settings programmatically, but it is something that I hope to see very soon in the Power BI tenant admin portal as well. But it's something that needs to arrive. So Shah, can you save all these changes in a file later on? No, that's the exact thing that I mentioned just now. You cannot programmatically extract the tenant settings in here. It's something that we've been advocating for heavily. It's something that I hope to see soon, but it's the Alex Power soon ... It's not coming tomorrow, hopefully sometime later. But I know that is something that we're advocating for heavily. And yes, Chewy, it means that the changelog needs to be kept manually at this point. That's the downside, but it does pay off to have this information stored and handy. Absolutely. That's about everything. Well, I can keep going for a long time. That's not the issue, but that's all that I want to do right now to be able to have that discussion as well. I saw Fernando. What can I share about Azure Purview? First thing is that it's no longer Azure Purview, it's Microsoft Purview as per the usual rebranding that we do every season. Microsoft Purview is a data cataloging and compliance solution for Microsoft. It means that you can, yes, branding, we're excellent at this. It means that you can connect Microsoft Purview to Power BI and automatically, programmatically get the overview of which workspaces do you have, which reports do you have, which data sources are they connected to. It allows you to get that catalog really easily as well. You have to know that it is a work in progress. It is a work in progress. It's not completely, the story isn't 100% smooth yet, and it's not a free project. That's the whole thing. It's not a free program. You need to pay for this as well. And some people say it's expensive. I say personally is that it's actually fairly cheap. If you look at, for instance, the Atacama data catalog solutions, the Informatica data catalog solutions, where you have to pay like the sevenfold at least for the cataloging solutions. But yes, I mean, we're talking about $200-300 a month to get the data catalog running for your organization. The alternative is that you look at something that my colleague Rui Romano, my Portuguese colleague, created. It's something called Power BI Monitor. It's not the full same, it's not the full same thing, but it does allow you to get the free version of this, and it extracts a lot of useful information about which artifacts do you have, which reports, which workspaces, which users, which the activity logs as well. That's what it extracts for you. There we go. So it's not pasting. And it also gives you, if it scrolled down, it also gives you a useful, built, readily to go Power BI report that you can look at. And it gives you the overview of all of the things that I mentioned. It gives you the overview of the activity log, who's been doing what, who's been doing stuff that you may not want to look at. And that's the good thing. It means that you have this, and we built a bunch of information as well on how you can get started with this, what you need to do for tenant settings as well. So it really helps you to get going with these things as well. That said, let's wrap it up and make sure that we can have discussions and questions as much as we like to have as well. There we go.
Amazing. Thank you, Benny. Guys, jump in the conversation. Ask questions. Look at all the...
Or questions. I mean, if you just want to have a different opinion, that's also just fine with me. I mean, I'm all for it. Any questions?
Yes.
I'll ask a question. Oh.
Go ahead.
The CPU monitor application, do you know if there's any plans of improvement? As being sometimes it's a little bit slow. I guess it's because it's a direct query trying to get your own data. And I connected to the data set, but I try to when I want to see like the time point details of, hey, what report is eating up your capacity, I wanted to bring in like user information. So I tried to join it to a data set where I have the audit logs, and then it just goes to hell when you try to do it. So are there any enhancements where you would be able to do that, or?
Yes. So the capacity metrics app that you're referring to is it's an ongoing work. It means that it means that we are continually creating changes to this, and I'm opening it up right now so I can show it. Long story short, there's a technical underlying issue right now that the user information isn't displayed in the metrics app. That's the thing. You only get the generic Power BI user right now. That's everything you get at this point. As soon as we have this resolved, it means that you will be able to get the Power BI user information. So if you right click on this, that's what you're meaning, but it is extremely finicky, especially if my laptop's running slow. There we go. There we go. It's extremely finicky. And that means that, yeah, that right now it's, right now it's just showing Power BI user, which isn't ideal. Absolutely not. But it's something that we want to get in the next weeks, month, that we want to make it available to get that user information as well. But it is, as you mentioned, it is still direct query running underneath this thing. It's still direct query, so it's still not going to be the smoothest, fastest operation you have, because this is effectively connecting to Custo sources underneath, and then it's also using import mode to get the dimensional information. But yes, that information is coming, hopefully sooner rather than later, and other improvements. I mean, we talk about this weekly, about this particular piece of this particular app with the product team as well, and we keep feeding them input back about things that we want to improve on for the next iterations of this app. So yes, definitely, we'll be seeing some changes.
Okay, that's good to hear that the users are coming back.
You had a question in the chat. Does the monitor only works for premium access?
So the Power BI monitor that I shared for Rui Romano works for shared capacity as well, for premium capacity. It doesn't take note of anything premium. It's what I'm showing right now, the capacity metrics utilization app, that's a premium thing only. And not premium per user, but that's a premium thing only. But the Power BI monitor is for Pro as well. It works exactly the same way. I did this one. So this tenant setting is allow users to try Power BI paid features. It means that everyone can give themselves a trial subscription, a pro trial, but under the cover, it just means that everyone can get themselves a premium per user feature. That's great because everyone can get started easily, but the premium per user part means that they can potentially also build stuff that relies on the premium features. And then as soon as those 60 days are up, then they can't use it anymore because you don't have those licenses, or because it can be a plethora of reasons. Debate what you want to do with this. Do you want people to be able to access this themselves? That works perfectly, but it's something that you need to be aware of, because there is no easy way of getting the overview of who gave themselves these premium per user features. The only way that you can get this information is by going back into that activity log and see who opted in for pro trial. That's the action that you need to look at. That's the whole point of these things. If you disable it, that means that people cannot give themselves a trial account. That means that if they want to do something, if you want to use the collaborative features of Power BI, you have to assign, or the admins have to assign, the Power BI Pro subscription or premium per user to them. You can automate this as well. I've seen organizations where they automate it through a ServiceNow ticket, that it just fires off an API call in the backend, that it's automated, but then they still have the overview easily of who's done it, who's done what, and then that's the whole point of it. This is just everyone can do this, and you as an admin will not have the easy overview of what's happening. Shah, is there any way for admins to see exiting employees' report names left in their personal workspace? Right now, no. The only way that you can do this is if you break into their account, reset their password, which isn't a very kosher thing to do. What I can say is that we have this thing on the release wave coming up. There we go. You have something on the release wave for improved My Workspace governance. It means that those personal workspaces will be on the same basis, the same architecture that we have for regular workspaces, the new workspace experience. So it will be a V2 workspace. That means that you as an admin have improved usage and improved overview of what you have for these workspaces. It means that you can actually see more easily what's in there and that you can actually do something with it as well. So the item for improved My Workspace governance is scheduled to go into public preview, scheduled to get into public preview into July 2022. And trust me, this is for Big Four and banks, this is a very, very popular request. This is something that is heavily needed because, as I mentioned, lots of people publish stuff to My Workspace. And you don't necessarily want that to happen. You want it to happen in a more shared environment where there's a bit more guardrails in place, where people can actually access that content easily as well. That's the whole point of this thing. But there is improvements coming on this as well. Nilam, best practices to increase report efficiency. Do you have 3 hours of time? I think that's one of the questions you have to ask Miguel. When is he coming back? In June somewhere, Cecilia?
June 9, yes.
Yeah, that's a question that you have to ask Miguel because he's we call him the Michelangelo of Power BI, not the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle, but the actual artist. Yeah, he's exceptionally good with Power BI report design. Let me share the link for the release wave, but I actually should share the report that Alex Powers made. But he created a Power BI report that iterates over these release waves, and it gives you just an interactive overview of which features are getting released, when are they released, and then it links you through to these docs pages as well. I think he made a short link for it, and I'll try to share it with you as well. But while I try to do that, Fernando, go ahead. You have a question.
Yes, well, a comment maybe mostly because sometimes real life comes in the way, and the Microsoft 365 administrators don't give all the administrative permissions to the Power BI group. No.
Yeah.
So
yeah,
this is the ideal world.
Yeah, I fully agree. Yeah, I can't find the short link for this, but yeah, as George mentioned, Alex Powers did repost this today. But yeah, Fernando, I absolutely agree. This is the reason why I said set up a developer tenant where you have all the privileges, where you have all the rights, is so you can figure out things yourself and that you can actually have the overview of, okay, what exactly do I need? So that you can go back to those M365 admins and say, I need this, because then they're more inclined to give it to you. I mean, I was a consultant, and lots of other consultants went in and they said, give me sysadmin on the SQL Server instance, and database administrators are not going to give this. I usually went in and said, okay, I need these privileges, these privileges, these privileges, these privileges because of this. And then they're more inclined to give it to you. So the fact that you have this ideal world sandbox tenant available, you can do your research, you can figure out what is exactly is needed, and then get back to those people to make sure that they can give it to you more easily. But I do agree, it's the internal politics as well of getting resources, getting privileges, getting permissions. It's not always easy. I mean, you You don't have to explain that to me. It's a very common theme I keep getting back. Yeah, and Fernando, you shared the link as well. That's exactly the one that I meant. It's a report that allows you to iterate on the release plan as well. Any more questions? Go ahead, Fabio.
I just wanted to say a comment on Fernando because that's an issue I also had. And I know Power BI in Microsoft, there's a PowerShell script that lets you like get the data from the audit logs.
Mhm.
So basically, my experience was have somebody from Office 365 team send it. I think we even had to open a ticket with Microsoft to help them set everything up. And then they were exporting the CSV files for us then to consume because I was never able to get access. But the PowerShell scripts are out there for you to give it to them, and you should be able to pull your data. That's what I was on the same boat with you, and my solution was that, kind of give them the baseline on where to get started.
Yeah.
They came into issues, open a Microsoft ticket and figure it out because I need these logs that provide me this data. And then once you give me the CSVs from there, you can or load it directly to Power BI or load it somewhere else where you want. But
Any more questions, remarks, comments?
Come on, guys. I saw that Reynaldo was asking for part 2 already.
Yes. Yeah, it's a shameless plug, but it's not a shameless plug. If you're looking for the reference material on anything Power BI administration, anything governance, look up Melissa Coates's materials. I'm trying to get the link. I'm trying to get my laptop to actually do something for me, but she has exceptional material. She authors a lot of the documentation pages that you see out on the everything from usage adoption framework that we have these days, the implementation scenarios. That's all Melissa writing those for us. So she offers a really good set on this particular topic as well. So everything that I want you to look at is she has public stuff as well. I know she has a training course, but there is also one useful link that I want you to look at. There we go. It should be this one, aka.ms/Power BI guidance. It's all it's the best of material that we, as the Power BI CAT team, assembled throughout the years. And it goes from everything for how do you do troubleshooting for data query to how do you actually create a decent report to how do you set up your tenant and how do you have that usage adoption framework that I refer to as well. So there we go. Teams is almost collaborating with me. It just gives you a lot of useful information for you to look at yourself as well. And it takes you to the docs pages, but the short link is just a bit more easy to remember. It's aka.ms/Power BI guidance. It should be there as well. Chewy, in general, based on the customers you have helped, do you think organizations are giving the importance that the Power BI admin role really has? In my consulting life or in my Power BI CAT life? Because the answer will depend. But I'll elaborate on this anyway while I wait for your input. In my consultant life, no. I worked with Belgian companies. There were large companies for Belgian standards, but they were not the large monolithic massive beasts that I work with now. Usually it was the DBA that was okay, well, you're the SQL person, so you're the Power BI admin now, or it was the Microsoft 365 admin, or it was that one person the one person that created Power BI reports anyway. So it didn't get the attention that it needed, the Power BI admin role, especially in times when not all the references like adoption framework, implementation guidance scenarios, when those things didn't exist. It meant that you were mostly on your own. That's the whole thing. But now we're a couple of years down the road, it means that lots of the community people have focused, they have shifted focus on what's the Power BI admin story? How do you do everything for data culture as well? It's not just about the 5 minutes to wow, this is how you load up an Excel file into Power BI. We've evolved from those topics to the bigger organizational chunks as well. Now that I work with the slightly larger companies for Power BI CAT, yes, I mean every one of the customers that I talk to, they have Power BI admins. It's a multiple. They have Power BI admins. They are working or they have established on setting up a center of excellence, and there the admin part gets the attention it deserves. But I'm still waiting, hoping, rooting for the moment when it goes from those larger companies down to the let's call them SMBs, to the not so giant companies as well, for them to realize that by enabling the admins, you actually enable all the end users. Because if you have those processes, if you have those things all set up and wired properly, it just means that your end users can do their work better with Power BI. That's the whole point of why you have these admins in the first place. So yes, Chewy, it's a very elaborate, it depends, but my answer is inclined to saying more yes now. But it still depends, absolutely. Okay.
You have one more question from Wilson.
Ooh. Are there any issues with also using passing info to external APIs like Twilio or SMS marketing? Which info? it's the why, depending on the info you pass. If it's usernames and passwords, then yes, I'm going to object, because it's the way that you're trying to send those to them. But ultimately, it boils down to are you okay with the data you're sending? And are you aware of the data you're sending to like a Twilio or SMS marketing? I'm not 100% sure on what exactly you send to that, but it's something that you have to look at. Typically, like I said, I'm the admin persona. I am skeptical at best, so it's something that I want to look into before I enable and activate it. But it's just the organizational story that you want to look into. Yeah. Any more questions? Any chats, comments, remarks? Go ahead.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, there are many thanks from everyone.
That's excellent. Well, that said, Cecilia, thank you for having me.
Yes.
I really like the format. Good luck, everyone else, with the next sessions, and then who knows, we'll run into each other somewhere else, somewhere soon. Have
Yes,
fun, and then
Thank you.
thank you very much. Thank everyone. I think.